I have my sponsons blueprinted, and I've also set them up on the fuselage to where I've worked it in where I have the same angle when it's assembled on both sponsons. Let's talk about where I am in this build, the slight change I'm making to the order of construction in the manual, and let's talk about blueprinting, what some might call the black art of blueprinting. I think it's a whole lot of common sense. It's also part of looking ahead to the next part of the build, the steps that you got to take, and figuring out how you're going to do it, understanding what you're doing. So I felt that there was no sense in just blueprinting individual sponsons, because they have to be assembled and epoxied to the fuselage, and both of these have what you call either a dead rise or a chine angle to them, and I feel it's important that both those angles are the same. Also, where is the ride pad on this boat? In other words, how far does the ride pad go up? And in order to blueprint it, I'm taking the sponsons off to sand them, reassembling to check my angles, and therefore it's also telling me that when I go to epoxy this together, that I can repeat those angles at assembly. Checking the sponsons lengthwise with a straight edge, I am seeing them start to curve up toward the tips at about the 12-inch mark. So these lines that I have on the tape here is referencing the area we're focusing on as far as blueprinting. So these look like about 12-inch long ride pads. The reference plane I'm using is the bottom of the fuselage, facing a camera. I know what it is. Should be 0 to maybe 1/10 of a degree along the length of the bottom of the fuselage. So no wave, nice flat reference plane lengthwise. Checking it lengthwise for twist, 1/10 of a degree, 0, 1/10 of a degree, 1/10 of a degree. So very good as far as twist over the length of the fuselage. I'm going to focus now on this area on the fuselage bottom and the angles on the sponsons in the ride pad area. Now let's check these angles on the ride pad area. I was hoping to keep the option open to leave the bottoms natural, in other words no color, but the pitch gauge was showing a twist on this one, so it was high back in this corner and in the front here. This was a slight twist, but it was a little more of a high spot right in here, so I had to take it down to true it up. I'm also going to put the pressure where this has kind of been blueprinted, because It's slightly low here and slightly low up here and here. So that'll be filled in when I put the clear on to seal the hull. It's almost there. So this looks to me like a 17-degree angle to these sponsons, real close to it. So side to side, that's really good. Now let's go down this sponson and see what I got. So center it up where the telltale is, real close to 17 degrees. Same over here. That way of blueprinting the sponsons with an accurate instrument like this, there's no way I would have, other than making them flat, I would have known that I had the straight edge was showing me this. I had a high spot here, but check with the angles, I didn't have as much twist. You can certainly see the twist here. I had to go through the first layer of the plywood into the darker color, but I had to sand this corner to corner. This is just roughed in. In other words, I'm using this block with fresh, sharp, rough paper to establish these planes. I will also check this assembly when I epoxy it together. Zero out the digital pitch gauge, verify that I got my angles during the cure. So that's something that I think you need to think about. This is wood. You could clamp it and have it slightly twisted. Because I did all this fitting in order to blueprint the sponsons, I am deviating from the manual. I'm not taping the inside of the fuselage and building the stumble blocks later. I got them epoxied in and it does fit. I can get these in and out easily enough. And that's not a criticism of the procedure in the manual. With this repeated fittings that I'm doing, I just felt like I didn't have to deal with taping the inside of the fuselage when you seal it to keep the epoxy out of these slots. Am I going a little over the top and fussing a bit too much with this build? That's how I like to build. And you could possibly just trust the accuracy of the laser cutting and simply sand your ride pads flat and clamp it together, epoxy it together. But maybe your angles would be slightly off and it would affect the performance of the boat and you wouldn't even know why. I have one more thing to show you that I'll benefit from doing it the way I'm doing it. I have to move these clamps to show it to you. This will be done after final assembly. Sponsons will be glued on the fuselage, and it involves the top sheeting. I used a method called scribing on this top sheeting so it matches the sides of the radio box that runs down the center of the fuselage. If you look down here, you can see it's not perfectly straight versus the laser cut side, how straight that is. But it is parallel to the scribe line. If you look all the way down here. So I sanded it, used just the corner of this block, so not like this, and I just sanded it to follow that scribe line. This center box is not perfectly straight. It's close, but there's a bit of a wave, mostly because I taped the radio box pulling in to these bulkheads, and I taped pulling out to these partial bulkheads, and then pulling in on the transom. So if you put the laser side against the center box, you can see it's a bit of a gap here and a gap in here. So I didn't like that fit. So I scribed it, and I got a much better fit. Pretty much a perfect fit all the way along the edge of that box. And this will also allow me to install the sheeting after I epoxy sponsons on. To scribe it, I simply taped a thin piece of 16th ply alongside the point of the pencil, and that'll maintain perfect distance and follow the wave going down the side of the fuselage. Scribe it all the way down and then sand it to that line. Then I continue to sand enough off of this side following that line to where this top sheeting moved in far enough and it fit between the side of this box and the sponson. And this is the laser cut side against my sponson. So that really shows how straight the sponsons are, the inside of the sponsons. There's no doubt this is the most complex part of this build, fitting the sponsons to the fuselage and then ultimately permanently epoxying them on. Nice fit right there.